Well, welcome to the First Friday concert. Today, we have a special pleasure of having my dear colleague, Paul Miller, play with us, and on this beautiful harpsichord. Well, anyway, we're so thrilled to have Paul Miller with us today. Paul Miller teaches in the music school at Duquesne University with me, and he teaches musicianship, or sometimes it's called theory, but he does so many other things too. One of the things that he does is he plays many instruments. He plays, you'll hear the viola d'amore. He also plays viola. He plays violin. He's played here at Redeemer before. In the last Bach birthday concert, he played with Don Franklin. And so we remember him then. But he's also interested in so many other things. He, for example, is interested in plants. He has done experiments with plants whereby he places electrodes on the plant leaves, and he can hear the plants actually talking. So this is a very interesting thing that he does besides that. He also does things with electronic music. So this is a man who is really multifaceted, and it's just an honor to have him with us today. Thank you, Paul.
We're going to start with a sonata by Corelli, who wrote what was quite possibly the most important set of violin sonatas in the whole 18th century. There are 12 sonatas, and this is the third one, which is in C major, and it's noteworthy for being one of the more difficult ones, but it's also really wonderful. It has a great variety, and yeah, here we are. Ready? thanks. Well, that's quite a fun thing to do, especially with Professor Labounsky here. I'm turning pages back now because, we're going to play something on the viola d'amore. So what is the viola d'amore? The viola d'amore is the love viola, and you need a slightly different bow to play it usually. The love viola, and so people often ask, what does love have to do with the viola? And because this was an instrument that was developed in the 1680s and 90s, and by the 18th century, people had put a set of resonating strings on it. And when two people are in love, it's perhaps one sets the other in motion from a distance. And that's kind of what happens, is that these resonating strings, which sound like this, you don't actually play on them, but they're set in motion by playing on the upper layer of strings. And so this is something that European makers were inspired by what they had seen from instruments coming in from Persia and India. Instruments such as the sarangi, which has a lot of resonating strings and very few playing strings. So they adapted the idea of resonating strings to an instrument they knew, the treble viole, and then they put it on the shoulder so you could play it fast. And they took the frets away. So that's the viola d'amore. The viola d'amore really got it going in the 18th century, and it kind of lost interest. People lost interest in the 19th century because it's kind of hard to keep in tune, as you can imagine. Viola d'amores have anywhere from 5 to 14 strings. Some of them have still more, but the standard-ish number is 12 or 14. And you might think, how could an instrument have 12 or 14 strings? Well, the earlier music from this period, the early 18th century, is usually for 6 playing strings and 6 sympathetics. But in the classical period, the viola d'amore still held some interest. So by the 1760s and 70s and 80s, you see some music for 7 strings, which is hard to play. It is also hard to make an instrument like this. So there are not many people who make it. And it has kind of a nasal sound. It's not very loud. And so that's another reason why it didn't make it much into the 19th century. So the piece we're going to play for you in just a minute is anonymous. We're not sure who wrote it, but we're sure it came from a particular monastery, a Benedictine monastery in Göttweig, which is about an hour and a half east of Vienna in Austria. And the Benedictine monastery has quite a lot of music. The monks loved to play music in their spare time. Somebody went there in 2016 looking for lute music and found this extraordinary collection of 24 partitas for the viola d'amore. 24 pieces, each multi-movement. And people thought it was lute music, but then someone looked at it and said, hey, actually this is viola d'amore music. So since 2016, we now have 24 complete, mostly, partitas. They take up 4 books. It's kind of one of the biggest finds in a long time for the viola d'amore. And we think that probably someone who knew Bieber, Heinrich Bieber, might have written a lot of these pieces, but we don't know for sure. So they have to stay anonymous, but they're definitely like a lot of Bieber's music. Bieber, of course, was a very significant composer in the end of the 17th century who worked in Salzburg, so he wasn't far from Göttweig or Vienna as the crow flies. But first, just to give you a sense of the different sound of the viola, the regular viola, and the viola d'amore, I'm going to play a Bach piece that you probably might recognize, and I'm going to do it on the regular viola, which is called the viola da braccio, which means the arm viola. Everything is really a viola. The violino is the violin is the little viola. The viola da gamba is the leg viola. This is the arm viola, and that over there is the love viola. So everything is really a viola. I mean, people don't realize this, but anyway. So I'll play a piece, Bach, the prelude to the first cello suite on the viola, and then we'll do the Goethe vibe piece after that. So.
please.
Let's do the jig one more time.
Yeah, one more time.
By the way, I should say one more thing. Actually, this instrument is not tuned anything like a normal violin or a viola. As you might have heard, it's actually tuned to the key that you're playing in. So I actually have those 6 strings. So it's a challenge to play this instrument for a lot of reasons, but the fingerings are completely different from what you would normally play on a violin or a viola. So that always makes it a bit of a challenge. But let's try the jig one more time. Shall we do an AABB?
Yeah, yeah.
Great, here we go.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Oh, sure. Yeah. Sure. You have a question? You had your hand up first.
Oh, sorry. Is there a ratio of sympathetic to playing strings for the...
Yeah, well, you can't really fit more than 7 playing strings on a bowed instrument like this, because the geometry is such that the curve is only, you have only so many degrees. It's quite difficult. For 2 weeks you sound really bad. But you get used to playing on 6 or 7 strings. It's never that easy, but you can do it. You have to really take it to a person who knows what they're doing, and there are not many of them. So I have to drive all the way to Waukegan, Illinois, which is north of Chicago. It's between Chicago and Milwaukee. And there's a guy there who knows how to work on these. There's a lot of people, there's 2 people in Toronto who are really good. But of course, crossing the border has been tough in the last couple of years. And there's like 1 person in New York who does work on these, and here and there. So yeah, you need to have No more than 7 playing strings, but you can have more than 7 sympathetics. In fact, there's a few instruments that were made that have 19 strings. So they have like 7 playing and 12 sympathetics, but that's very unusual. There's only a few of those instruments. But 7 and 7 is a pretty manageable number.
You said 7 and 7.
7 and 7. 6 and 6 is even easier.
So is that up to the discretion of the instrument maker, or does it suit the composer? I mean, can the composer say, hey, I want, you know?
Yeah, well, the earlier music, like this music from the 1680s and 90s, it's all for 6 strings. And when Bach wrote his 2 arias for the viola d'amore in the John Passion, so there's 2 magnificent arias in the John Passion, right after Jesus is being beaten. So it comes at a very poignant moment in the Passion. And so Bach pulled out 2 viola d'amores to play for about 15 minutes, 2 remarkable arias. And those instruments, you can play it on 5 or 6 strings. Some of them were 5 strings, but very soon they put sympathetics on, and so that became 12 very soon. So the instrument really only started to be played in the 1670s and 80s. And then it might not have even had sympathetic strings. And then for about 30 years, it might not have had. I mean, we were used to thinking of instruments as having a standard shape, size, tuning, number of strings, that sort of thing. But of course, none of that was the case in the 18th century before mass marketing took over and standardized tunings and shapes and sizes. So every harpsichord that Anne plays on is different. Let's give her some credit too, because she has never, have you ever played? She has actually never played on this particular instrument before. And so let's actually give her some credit too, because
Well, it was always Don Franklin who was playing this instrument, you will remember.
well, yeah, the harpsichord, of course, is a little easier to take with you, but it's always different. It's always a little different. And this, of course, this instrument, there are many different shapes and sizes that makers made. So it's quite fascinating. You get a lot of insight into a character of a person or music. And as you get into later music from the 1760s, 70s, and 80s, then it starts to be more taking advantage of 7 strings, and into the early 19th century. And then there's very little music for the viola d'amore in the 19th century. A few remarkable pieces, but not many.
How old is that?
Well, this is a copy of instrument from the 1760s, and this is a very, very fine copy made by the guy who lives in Waukegan, who studied in Germany. And this instrument's from 2009, I think. Is it 2009? It's aged very well. No, actually, sorry. My other one is from 2009. This is from 2013. Yeah. Yes.
So I don't have my glasses on, but I think I see 14 pegs.
Yeah, there's 14.
And I'd like to come up and look at it in a minute.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
You were playing on 6. Are they
7.
above? You
Well,
were playing on 7.
6. The lowest string I don't need for the piece we just played.
So are they raised a little bit
Yeah.
above the other ones?
Yeah, so the resonating strings are affixed to little nails here, and they're under quite less tension than the playing strings. Of course, tension and stress is a big problem on this instrument, so you have to be quite careful with it. But it works. They go through a tunnel underneath. They actually go underneath the fingerboard. That's pretty common. That's the only way to really do it. And then they come out the back, and they come into these pegs higher up, because the longer the string, all other things being equal, the longer the string, it's more tension. So they put the lesser tension strings up here, because they have to be longer strings. And then the playing strings, which are much heavier, are the shorter ones. So they are the shorter strings, so that the instrument isn't under quite as much stress.
Do you have to tune?
Yeah, well, so 18th century composers never specified the tuning of the resonating strings. So I tune them to usually a unison or something like that to the playing strings. They don't break very frequently, but when they do break, it is quite a problem to restring them. Some instruments, so inside this tube you can see a little wooden stick, and that's how I sort of thread a resonating string through and pull it through with a little popsicle stick. It's a stick that the maker gave to me. And there's a little hole drilled in it. So you thread a resonating string through and you pull it through, because otherwise it takes 45 minutes. And some viola d'amores I have seen, some do not permit you to change resonating strings without taking all the playing strings off, which is a huge pain. Which luckily, as I say, these resonating strings don't break very frequently, and they're very inexpensive. The playing strings are much more expensive. But they do every once in a while break. So I tune these to something that will make some sound, some small amount of sound. And the playing strings are generally tuned, the composer in the 18th century usually specifies how to tune it, because it won't work. You see, you simply can't play certain music if you're not tuned in the right way. It just becomes, I mean, there are some possibilities for a few changes sometimes in tuning, but you don't want to mess with that. The problem is with Bach, because Bach did not actually specify the tuning of his viola d'amores for the John Passion, and that is a bit of a problem. So there are two sort of different ways of doing it. And when you play with another person, you want to usually be tuned the same way, just for your mental sanity. Just because it looks and feels awkward to play a duet with somebody who's really tuned very differently. It can work, it can work, but it requires quite a large investment, not only in money to buy a beautiful instrument, but also in time to just master the fingering. It's very, very different. In fact, I'll do one fun thing for you that I was playing for Anne earlier. So here's the jig that we just played. And I'll just play the beginning. Do we have time for this?
What kind of?
Do we have time?
Sure.
So I'll just play the beginning, maybe the first 20 bars or so, and I'll play it on the viola d'amore, and then I'm going to use the same exact fingerings on the violin, which is tuned the traditional way. So here we go. So now I'm going to play the same exact thing using the same exact fingerings on the violin. Okay. So you have to.
Oh, so hard.
You have to get past, the way it looks and the way it feels, and allow the instrument, trust that it's going to work. So it's, yeah.
And how many instruments do you have, Paul?
Oh, come on.
We want to know.
Well, most of them students have on loan, actually. But I have about 8 instruments. And I have to say that partly that's because some of them people gave to me. So I think one of them was given to me many years ago by a guy I knew in Germany. And a lot of these bows, this bow somebody gave to me. So it's quite a nice bow, actually. But yeah, I loan them out to students. So I have only 3 on me right now. But students have about two or three of them out on loan right now.
Now, I forgot to tell you that he has started an early music ensemble at Duquesne called the Duke's Music, and they're going to be playing
Yeah,
concert
April 1st
at Shady Side
No
Presbyterian
joke,
Church.
on April 1st, April Fool's Day, in the evening, we're going to have a really nice concert, including music by Isabella Leonarda, who was one of the most gifted composers of the late 17th and early 18th century, and she wrote a beautiful, so many. She was an abbess in Milan, actually, and her music was published. It was remarkable that she got her music printed. And we're going to play, among other things, a wonderful cantata by Isabella Leonarda. So come and enjoy in Shady Side in the Presbyterian Church.
Right, and
Yeah.
we're grateful to Justin Wallace, who is one of the organists there and who played the recital here a month ago, and he tuned this organ this morning for us. So, you know.
He's going to be playing with us.
Yeah.
And the rest is students who have just for the first time really encountered playing in a Baroque style on historical instruments as much as we can. But yeah, it's amazing what we're doing, and we're very grateful to be able to do it.
So.
Well, thank you all again so very much for joining us.